Good afternoon and welcome to this IT governance webinar on cyber incident response readiness for SMEs. What I'm going to do is just give you a couple more minutes for the last few people to actually connect and start their audio and video. In the meantime, what I would like to do is go through some basic housekeeping. The presentation will take around about sort of 45 minutes. There'll be some time for questions afterwards. If you'd like to ask a question, can you pop it into the question box in the control panel, which is normally on your right-hand side of your screen. If you can put the questions in there, we'll try and answer them before the end of the actual session. In terms of the handouts, there are a number of handouts in the handouts section within the control panel for you, which you can download, or we'll be sending the handouts out in an email afterwards. So I'll just give it another minute and then we'll start properly. Okay, I can see that a number of people have joined. So we will start the presentation. As I've already said, if you want to ask questions, please type them into the question box on the right-hand side of your screen, in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And so the handouts from the slides from this presentation will be available in the handouts, which are also available in that control panel. So thank you for attending and welcome to this IT governance webinar on cyber incident response readiness for SMEs. My name's Garrett Williams. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the GRC International Group, which is the parent group for IT Governance Limited and the collection of companies that form the group. I've been in that role for the last 2 years. Prior to that, I've had 15 years of doing information security, and prior to that, was involved in this the technical side of networking, etc. Very much from a technical background. Built my first computer back in the 80s by soldering components onto a circuit board, and these days I use a lot of Raspberry Pis and Arduinos to form small hacking devices, etc. I've been CISP qualified for over 13 years, and I have worked as a PCI QSA and as a CREST accredited ethical hacker in previous roles, which include the formation of IT governance's technical services, which offer ethical hacking, PCI, QSA work, and the cyber essentials. So that's a bit about myself. If we talk a little bit about IT governance and the group. So the group is primarily a provider of cyber risk and privacy solutions, and you're probably familiar with some of the group companies. We have IT Governance, which does the consultancy, pen testing, cyber essentials that you're probably all familiar with. We have GRCI Law, which supports organizations with DSARs, DPOs, etc. We have GRC Learning, who develop and support our e-learning courses that you can purchase. We have ITGB Publishing, who do our books and toolkits. We have our one of our sister companies, gdpr.co.uk, which is about GDPR for primarily for the educational area, schools, etc. We have Vigilance Software, who develop and maintain our data mapping tools, risk assessments, which are all part of Cyber Comply. And we have DQM GRC, who are specialists in privacy and have a data seeding operation to allow tracking of data sets especially sort of unlicensed use of data sets. So IT governance is a sort of GRC one-stop shop offering sort of governance, risk management and compliance. As you can see from this slide, we offer all forms of sort of activities under cyber resilience and governance and risk management. And primarily we are delivering consultancy, certification, technical security, training and qualifications, software tools, and books and toolkits. But really, that's the sort of enough for the IT governance in the GRCI group. If we move on to sort of today's agenda, the real purpose of this webinar. So according to the RBM's cost of data breach report, it takes an average of 280 days to identify and contain a breach, and the cost can be a staggering amounts. The average cost can be a staggering amount, sort of reaching over 3 million. And there is a big impact to organisations. So what we're actually looking at today is the organisation's ability to identify and respond to cyber events, instance, so they ensure their survival. So we're going to examine the key challenges SMEs face when responding to a cyber attacks and how to successfully prepare for an incident. We'll be covering the cyber threats organisations have faced in 2020, how to assess your organisation's cyber incident response capabilities, and how to improve your ability to identify and respond to incidents and potential data breaches. So I said the data breach reports from IBM has sort of indicated that often breaches are not discovered for, as they say, 207 days on average. And after they're discovered, it then takes a further 73 days on average to contain a breach. And that was based on data in 2019, which gives a life cycle of 280 days from when a company is breached until it's actually completed the remediation work. Obviously, for SMEs, it's actually a little bit less. But in terms of actually the dwell time, the time between sort of the breach and it being discovered is actually still very large, often due to the fact that SMEs do not have the specialist information security professionals to actually do the identification and management of the incident response. The time to remediate is often a lot shorter due to the smaller infrastructure that SMEs actually have. But it can still be a considerable time, and every day that you are breached before you can fix it can potentially add to the cost of the actual breach itself. RBM did break down the costs of the breaches, and for those organisations less than 500 people, they indicate that the cost of the breach is in the order of sort of £2 to £3 million, which is still a very large amount. What we've done is looked at some of the other reports around SMEs and breaches, and particularly around the UK, because we wanted to assess now what is the actual sort of threat to small organisations and whether or not they are actually a target. So according to the Insurance and Risk Management Gallagher, who polled a large number of UK firms up to 250 employees, they found that over 1.4 million businesses were hit by major attacks last year, costing a combined 8.8 billion. So that is actually still a large amount of money per company. And nearly a quarter of these firms were affected by a sort of a crisis incident that would actually threaten the organisation's existence, a sort of 5% increase on the previous year. Although they actually determined that the average cost for an SME was around about 6,400. 17% said it was more than 10,000. 10% actually paid out more than 20,000. And quite often with breaches, it's not just the cost of the actual breach itself, there are additional costs. And you could expect that with all the costs included, including some of the intangible ones, you could see sort of organisations being costing over £100,000 to actually remediate the breach. A report from another insurance company, Hiscox, earlier this year revealed a sharp increase on reported cyber attacks year on year against small organisations, with it increasing from 33% to 47% of businesses and small businesses across Europe and the USA. So basically, SMBs are at risk. The UK National Cyber Security Centre reports that if you are a small, medium enterprise, there's around 1 in 2 chance that you'll experience a cyber security breach of some form. This could be a very minor one, such as an employee responding to a phishing email and having to change their password, to actually a organisational existence threat from being attacked by ransomware and the potential to put the organization completely out of business. So there is a wide range of threats that an organization could face. And it's also been reported that sort of SMEs have themselves considered that the lack of security personnel and lack of budget is the biggest challenges to improving their cyber security. So just to sort of finish off on sort of the pattern and the background to sort of cyber attacks on SMBs, Beamin, which is a sort of a managed service provider who look after a number of organisations in the UK, they've done monitored the attacks on the organisations that they're involved with, and they've seen a dramatic increase in the last 2 years in the number of cyber attacks per month on UK businesses, with it now averaging around sort of 60,000 attacks per month that they are actually seeing. Now, many SMBs do consider, small businesses consider themselves that they're going to be obscure enough not to be attacked. But unfortunately, although cyber criminals do actually like to go after the large organizations and get the large rewards, they have recently been increasingly attacking small businesses. Large companies can give a fantastic return for a successful attack, but it's been getting harder for the cyber attackers to actually get in and actually create that breach and get into the organization. Large organizations have been deploying sort of cybersecurity professionals, deploying SEMs, security event and incident management systems, login monitoring to actually monitor their network. And what cyber attackers have realized is that the return on their investment in attacks is better against the smaller organization that does not have the dedicated cybersecurity teams. So although they've got to do more frequent attacks, those attacks are more likely to be successful and get back some form of reward, giving them a better return on their investment. So what are the cyber threats that organizations have actually faced in 2020? And throughout the year, I've been monitoring sort of the reports and statistics about attacks and threats. And it's been interesting to see the way that various organizations have reported increases in attacks. Some organizations have said the level of attacks has been similar to other years. And what probably is true is that organizations are facing the same sort of mix of cyber threats, the ransomware, the phishing emails, malicious insiders, but in different ratios to previous years. And there's been a dramatic increase in social engineering and the use of sort of COVID in lures to get people to respond to sort of emails. So I think sort of 2020 for a lot of organizations is going to go down as another year of ransomware. There's been a big space of ransomware attacks reported around the world, in particular on healthcare organizations, etc., where there've been some very large ransoms actually demanded. And there's also been a series of ransomware attacks against educational establishments. So the cyber threats include sort of virus and worm infestations, of business email compromises, phishing emails, ransomware, attacks on your supply chain. The There's also been a resurgence in the distributed denial of service attacks, and there's always the sort of the lost equipment and sort of sensitive data on that equipment. So there's been a sort of big range of sort of attacks. As I say, in the press, exactly, it's been well reported about the ransomware attacks against sort of educational and medical institutions, but there have also been a lot of attacks against industrial control systems, operational technology that control systems operate on, and that's affected a large number of organisations this year. So the UK the Cybersecurity Breaches Survey 2020, which is a bit more relevant to ourselves as it's UK focused, has sort of identified that sort of fraudulent emails or been directed to fraudulent websites is very prevalent, and we'll probably sort of find that our inboxes are full every day of some form of phishing attempt, etc., against someone in the organisation. Increasingly, and especially in the charity sector, there are this sort of the business email compromises where the attackers are trying to impersonate someone in the organization and ask them to do a favor and basically get them to actually do something like send funds to bank account details that have been sent in a quick email saying that they need this doing quickly as a favor, this emergency, and the person they're impersonating says that they're not available for a quick chat, but can you just do this as a favor for me? There is the viruses and spyware, malware going around, and the sort of the regular attempts to actually hack into online banking accounts. A lot of this is actually as a result of sort of people trying to get passwords and other credentials from the sort of the phishing emails that go around. Ransomware is sort of there. And then you sort of go down to the sort of the smaller attacks. But I would say for most small organisations, it's the social engineering in terms of phishing emails and back emails that are of a worry, and also that the ransomware, which can particularly affect an organisation and its ability to continue. So there's been a wide range of sort of attacks. And one of the sort of the common things has been the use of COVID, etc., in the lures, especially the social engineering. And in the Computer Weekly on the 22nd of May, they sort of published this sort of graph which shows how rapidly cyber criminals switched on to coronavirus, started putting it into the subject mail lines, etc., to get people to click, offering information on COVID, etc. So there's been a dramatic increase in sort of lures, subject lines around COVID and the COVID response. This is not actually unusual for cyber criminals. They are always very quick to actually identify newsworthy events and use them as part of the way of social engineering people to respond. So at the moment, there are a lot of phishing emails going around and other social engineering attacks going around that are using the US election as part of sort of their lures, etc. And I expect towards the end of this year, there'll be increasing numbers of cyber criminals who will be trying to exploit uncertainty over Brexit. So this year, organisations have faced basically the same threats as they always threats, but the mix has varied, and there's been a dramatic increase in sort of the phishing emails and sort of ransomware. And in the last sort of couple of months, I would actually say there's been an increase in the denial of service attacks where organisations are threatened with being taken offline if they don't pay a fee to prevent the denial of service attack. So that sort of gives you an indication of the threats that organisations are facing. So we want to sort of move on and look at how you can assess your organisation's cyber incident response capabilities. All organisations need a form of cyber incident response. And what I'm basically going to say is that can either be internal within your organisation, or it could be external. It could be organisations that you've identified, resources that you identified that could help you when you have been attacked and breached. And one of the important things about this is that you need to sort out your cyber incident response capabilities before you actually have a breach. To either identify the resources internally or identify some resources externally that you can actually call on. And lots of organizations provide these and actually even have a sort of call-off service that you can sign up to. So Hiscox, that insurance company, they did a survey and asked companies to rank themselves actually as to how they felt themselves were actually cyber ready for responding to an incident. And a large number of organizations actually responded and said they ranked themselves as novices. And a lot of organizations actually said, well, 16 to 20% said, 1 in 5 of them said they actually had no defined for cybersecurity, no defined role for cybersecurity within their organization. So it shows that amongst a lot of organizations, there's room for improvement, and the quicker you can respond to an incident, you can actually reduce the seriousness of it. So as well as actually asking organizations about their readiness for actually an incident, they also asked what organizations were doing. And Hiscox identified some of the points that a good SMB would actually do, a small medium business, would actually do to get themselves ready for an incident. And they identified sort of 3 things that the good organizations were actually doing to actually protect themselves. So they would actually actively engage in cyber awareness training. They would deploy antivirus or anti-malware systems consistently across the organization. And they took decisions based on the clearly defined business needs or cybersecurity tolerance. And that's what the good organizations were doing to actually prepare themselves for an incident. So what is a cyber response capability? Well, it's about having a sort of team or a resource for handling cyber incidents. As I said a little bit earlier, that could be internal, it could be a group of people that you can actually use for handling a cyber incident, or it may be that you've identified an organization, maybe you've partnered with them, who would actually come in and help you with your response capability. But that is actually done before the response occurs. Any delay in responding to an incident can actually cost you more. So actually being prepared and having that resource identified is an important part. There's also the documentation for handling cyber incidents. It doesn't necessarily have to be an award-winning ISO 27001 ISMIS manual for actually doing the handling of the cyber incident, but you need documentation, whether it's a simple procedure for actually notifying your cyber incident provider or for actually handling simple incidents internally. You do need documentation so people know what they're doing. And I've always sort of said it's actually important that those managing the incidents have the necessary authority to make decisions and take actions without having to escalate them and wait for a response. In some of the more serious incidents, the best response could be to shut your network down completely to stop the spread of malware or to stop the spread of ransomware. And that can be costly to an organization, but probably not as costly as if everything is encrypted and you're unable to retrieve the data. So you do need to have people who've got the authority to make those hard decisions and potentially take very big steps to actually stop a cyber attack before it gets too serious. So the ability to actually for someone to shut down your network can be very important. It's also important to have a reporting process and defined response times as to how people will respond to those reports, making sure everyone knows their plan, their part, and what to do from reporting incidents to responding. And it's very clear to point to say that everyone in the organization actually plays a part in identifying a incident. Everyone can actually see that a system is misbehaving, not performing normally. They can identify when some things are not actually sort of following their sort of the normal behavior, and they can raise that to the service desk, to the incident team to actually further investigate. So it's important that everyone plays their part. And you do need to make sure that you do periodically test out all the common scenarios as part of the continuous development of the capability. And that could be through sort of tabletop or simulated exercises, identifying the most relevant types of incidents and sort of running through the likely events, security event scenario, primarily to make sure that your plan works and you identify the list of gaps that should be addressed as part of a sort of continuous improvement. There are a lot of maturity models that you could deploy to actually measure your cybersecurity, but for most organizations, you could probably have a quick read of this slide and you probably identify which level you currently are at. Level 1 is actually having very little awareness about cybersecurity within your organizations through to sort of a world-class vanguard sort of level 5 response. And for most organizations, actually being level 3, level 4 is probably the ideal point for yourselves rather than being world-class in your response. So we talked about the sort of the capability and the fact that you need to sort of self assess yourself and your ability. Do you have a sort of a team in place? Have you identified resources and have that ready? So what we need to look at is how can you actually improve your ability to identify and respond to incidents and potential data breaches. So it's very important to actually ensure that your staff know and have practiced how to do this, but also that they've all got the tools and the knowledge they need to actually respond to an incident. So one of the things I would say that you need to be aware of that, even though you may have good cyber hygiene, you've got Cyber Essentials Plus, you've got other certifications in there, you've got layered defenses. They're all prevention, but they don't necessarily prevent an attack from occurring. All these sort of layered defenses, the good cyber hygiene, they reduce the risk by reducing the likelihood of an attack. So you still need to have an incident response plan in place for when the prevention does not work. When an attacker finds a way of circumventing it, or somebody within the team makes a mistake, you do need to have that incident response plan in place. And a very sort of simple way of sort of looking at it is you need the preparation. And you need to put a lot of effort into preparing for the actual incident response to make sure you've got everything in place, the training, the plans, and then you've got to work on detecting it. The earlier detection of an incident, the quicker your response, the less serious hopefully the incident will be. And once you've detected an incident, it's about containment, eradication, and the discovery phases to close the incident down before you move on to sort of the post-incident activity. So I want to talk a little bit about the preparation. So this is actually defining your team or the capability for a response, making sure that you've got that in place and people know their role or know who to contact. You also need the plans for the response as well. But probably ought to have highlighted this. But to me, for small organizations, it is important to understand about the backups. A lot of incidents will need you to actually either restore systems, rebuild systems as part of the containment and eradication. And without having good backup, you will not be able to do that. So I would say one of the primary things to do is to ensure that your backup within your organization is backing up everything you need to restore as part of an incident response, and that these backups are known to be good. So you need to back up the data that your organization relies on. But in addition to the data, you also need to make sure you've got backups of your licenses. If you're rebuilding a system and you've got to put the applications and the operating systems back on there, have you got the licenses, copies of them, so you can actually re-register them, re-enroll them back into the sort of reporting systems, etc. So that you don't have to go out and buy licenses. And then, do you actually have a backup of all the operating systems and applications that you have installed? Or have you just downloaded software, installed it, and then lost the actual application? So you do need to make sure that you've got the data, the licenses, the operating systems, the applications, documentation and configuration in place. As I say, a lot of incidents will require you to access this sort of backup to enable you to do the restoration. And with this backup, it's important that you actually keep it secure. Particularly with ransomware, they will infect a machine, or they will actually get onto your network and be there for a couple of weeks, examining your network, looking for the data. So if they find your original data and then they find the backup, they will encrypt both lots. So your backup needs to be kept secure. It really ought to be a copy kept offline or not directly connectable from the actual your network, so that if an attacker gets onto your network, they can't connect to your backup and either erase it or encrypt it along with your actual data itself. So as part of the preparation, making sure you've got everything in place to respond is important. But I would say probably one of the most important things is the backup of data. You then want to sort of look at the detection and analysis. And you'll find, people like myself will actually say you need to actually monitor your network. You need to actually have in place the systems to analyze the alerts and actually identify when you are being attacked. Now, quite often, if you're using products like Microsoft Office 365 and some other products itself, you've actually got a lot of tools within those products to help you with security these days. So if you have invested in the sort of Microsoft technology stack, and I've talked about this in a recent webinar as well, is get your return on investment with those licenses that you've purchased and turn on the security alerting within those products. Make sure that you're aware of all the portal interfaces and where you can actually see what is going on with your network. Start with the basics, use what you have within your actual applications and your technology stack, get the best return on investments on your licensing, and then sort of look to see where you can actually improve that with additional tools. But critically, it's actually the people within your organization that are very important part of detection. Your users know when a system is running slower than normal. Your users know when something actually is not working as they're expected. So they can actually report through to your incident management people, something is wrong and it needs investigating, it needs the triage response. So it's very important to have the detection and analysis phase, which encompasses monitoring the potential attack vectors to actually look for signs of incidents. And when you actually identify an incident, it does need to be sort of triaged. You need to identify how serious it is and then trigger the appropriate response. Do you need to call in your incident response team out of hours? Do you need to call your incident response company? Can this be dealt with the IT operations team or your managed service provider the next day? Or does it just need some action later on? So the triage is important around the detection phase. It's very important once an incident is determined that you actually respond very quickly to contain it, eradicate it, and discover if there's actually any further infections, etc., that need to be dealt with. And it is also important that the people that are doing this have actually got the authority to take whatever necessary action is required. If you've got ransomware spreading through your network, probably the best way of preventing it going any further is to turn everything off and then rebuild systems, restore them back onto the network one by one, making sure they're thoroughly cleaned, upgraded, and hardened before putting them back onto the network. So you do need to have your team needs to actually have the authority to actually carry out potentially extreme actions to safeguard your long-term survivability of your organization. So as part of the containment, eradication, discovery, you need to be able to disable network access from computers known to be infected by viruses or other malware. And if it's just one or two, that's machines, or 3 or 4 machines, just very few, it's easy to do. If there's a lot of machines infected, it is actually easier to shut the network down. You have to install security patches to resolve malware issues. So people need to have the necessary admin functions to do that. You may need to reset passwords for users with accounts that are breached, or block accounts of insiders that may be causing the actual incident. And you may need to back up all the infected systems to preserve their current state for later forensics. And the last stage, which is the post-incident activity, it's about notification and lessons learned. Increasingly, there are regulations such as GDPR and the Californian CCPA that actually requires public notification in the event of a data breach. If people are affected, they need to be notified. So actually planning how you do that notification is very important. And you also need to learn from the lessons from the incident and do the sort of the lessons learned and actually improve the whole of your organization to make it more robust in the future. So best practice after a breach, and this is an important part of the sort of the notification, is to sort of look at, you should be the source of the news announcing the breach. It shouldn't be a third party or someone else saying that you've been breached. You need to be the source of the news announcing the breach. You also need to have a robust notification plan in place to tell stakeholders, employees, customers, everyone else that's going to be involved about the breach. And if you've got PR within your organization, or it can be worth speaking to a PR company about what sort of notification letters need to be prepared, etc., and have them ready to be sent out. And also show a willingness to actually fix security problems when you're actually discussing this, and be transparent with all parties involved. It is said that it's not a case of if you will be breached, but a case of when you will be breached. So if you are breached, you need to have everything in place to actually respond and give people that feeling that you were ready and you took action to actually make it look like you've managed the situation and you've minimized the actual risk, the impact of the actual incident. So there is a best practice, especially around notification after a breach. So there are some mistakes to avoid. The advice from the NCSC and other government bodies is don't pay off the hackers. especially sort of the ransomware. There's no guarantee that you would actually get the data back. And if you've actually done the preparation properly and if you've got the backup of your data and it's been secured, there is no need to pay the ransomware criminals. You can just rebuild your systems, restore the data. Don't wait to notify the public. There's been numerous cases where companies have looked bad by delaying notifications to the public about breaches that affect them. So follow good practice. Don't wait to notify, make the notification to them. But don't make any definitive statements until you can confirm the facts. It looks bad that if you make a statement and it's later then proved to be incorrect, you appear to be slightly incompetent about your investigation. So do notify people as soon as possible. In fact, under the GDPR, you've got to tell the RCO within 72 hours of the breach. You don't have to give a full investigation, but you do need to tell them about the breach, your current state of investigation, and what you're planning to do. So what are my sort of 10 tips for cybersecurity response? So ensure you have adequate staff, that they are trained and they are knowledgeable. They know what they've got to do, they know how they've got to do it, they've got the knowledge to actually do that. And potentially, if you don't have the staff within your organization, then look at external resources that can actually help and bolster your own staff in this area. Ensure that you've got clearly defined roles and responsibilities, and that people have got the necessary authority to make the hard decisions if they need to. The quicker response, the better. Increase user awareness and training to avoid the more advanced threats. We're very much aware of sort of the phishing threats, etc. But there are additional training you could do to some people to actually protect against the more advanced threats that are coming in. Can your people actually identify a BEC attack? Can they identify emails that have actually come from a compromised supplier, where it's come from a legitimate supplier, but the content is slightly off, etc. It's asking things that the supplier wouldn't normally ask. Can your staff identify those type of attacks? Have formalized response processes and procedure. It is always best to actually start off with a well-prepared plan, because during an emergency, during an incident, when people are actually under pressure, having something there for them to follow is important. It is said that often the best laid plans only survive as long as until the first engagement, and that may be true, but having a plan there that you can start off with is important. Once you've actually engaged with the incident, you may need to modify it, but if your staff have got the responsibility and the authority to do so, it all helps. Look at the way that you improve you manage your vulnerabilities, and have in place a vulnerability management program. This is part of basic cyber hygiene and part of the layered defenses. Minimize the number of vulnerabilities that you have within your organization. Be aware of the ones that you have and try and put in place remediation or compensative controls to reduce them. Learn from past incidents and breaches. You can always continually improve your processes to make sure you improve your response time, detection time, improve the actual response to the actual incident itself. Have a formalized incident response tracking workflow to actually manage the process. Look at a centralized or real-time monitoring alerting covering major proportions of the enterprise. And this is where I've said that if you actually use sort of the Microsoft technology stack, there are a lot of tools available within the actual Microsoft licensing that actually can help you with this. look at improving your forensic analysis, or actually determine companies that actually can do this for you, so you know who to go to at the time of the breach without having to actually rush around and find one very quickly. Do your due diligence on the forensic analysis beforehand and make sure that you know who to contact. And develop or improve your cyber threat intelligence. This can be as simple as reading sort of a number of articles on a weekly basis to see what attacks are occurring. So reading the computer press and noticing that COVID-themed attacks have increased, or maybe US election-themed attacks have increased this week, etc. Maybe there's been an increase of ransomware on small businesses reported in the computer press. Very simple threat intelligence that organizations can do. So the takeaways from this webinar is accept that your business will be targeted. It is a question of when and not if you'll be breached, and plan for that. Deploy the best practices to prevent a breach and then to respond when a breach occurs. Have the cyber hygiene, have the vulnerability management program in there, do the patching, etc., but also plan that those will not always protect you, and rehearse that plan. Make sure your staff know what to do, know how to report, know how to respond to an incident. So that brings us to the end, and what I'd like to say that sort of potential next steps are, from IT governance, we offer cybersecurity as a service, a dedicated cybersecurity specialist to help you address your cybersecurity challenges, including incident response. We have incident response management courses. We help you with your cybersecurity through consultancy, and we can actually help you with the remote working under sort of COVID-19, etc. We have a lot of consultancy, training, self-learning that can actually help you. So I'd like to thank you for listening, and are there any questions? While we're waiting for some questions to come in, I would just like to say that you can contact us via our website, email and phone, or via the normal social media channels. All these details are in the slide pack, which are available under the handouts, or will be sent to you after this webinar has finished. I'm not currently seeing any questions, and we have got through to sort of 45 minutes, which was the sort of the length of the sort of the session that was sent out. If you do have questions and you want to discuss things with us, please contact us. We're more than happy to speak to any organisation about their issues and situation, and see what we can offer to actually help you, etc. So I think hang on a minute. Okay, right, okay. Well, there is a sort of question about how can small business owners keep track on threat intelligence when they need to focus on revenue generation. I think there's actually a sort of a problem across most small businesses, is that they're specialists in what they do. They need to focus on what their actually primary mission is to actually survive. But it is actually worth putting a little bit of time aside to actually do the very simple things that actually will help. You know, threat intelligence does not need to be diving into the dark web to actually see what cyber attackers are actually doing. it doesn't necessarily mean signing up to actual service threat intelligence services that do the dark web diving on your behalf. It could be just 5 minutes each day, just having a quick look at the headlines from a lot of the actual cybersecurity the computer press, and seeing what they're saying are the latest attacks. And quite often you'll actually see even reports of these actually on the BBC News website, etc. Getting intelligence on what actually currently is happening across a lot of the business is not too difficult to do. Getting detailed threat intelligence is, but what you need to do is actually be aware of what is actually the current threat. And quite often, so the NCSE send out emails, etc., on a regular basis. So they do a weekly threat intelligence bulletin that you can sign up for, that tells you what the current headlines are for that week. So it could be a question of this. It could be just a question of signing up for some of those alerts. And threats are not the same for all businesses etc. So I've previously talked about this on other webinars, and I think these are available on our YouTube channel. But basically, threats would depend upon your size of business, what your business is doing. Some organizations are more likely to be attacked by nation states than others. Others are going to be more likely to be attacked by hacktivists, others more by cyber criminals, especially if they're dealing with e-commerce. And then you've also got the recreational hackers who may be looking to get various organizations on their sort of belt as a notch to say they've actually done that. So threats are not the same for all businesses. I can spend a lot of time talking about doing threat analysis, identifying your business likelihood of attack from the different threat actors, but yeah, it's not all the threats are not all the same. Some organizations will be more susceptible to ransomware, others are probably going to be more susceptible to a sort of business email compromise. And that is down to sort of a detailed knowledge of an organization. So hopefully you have found it useful. Please do get in touch with us. And I would like to thank you for attending. And please, I look forward to actually speaking to you again on the next webinar. Thank you very much.